Okay, as promised, these are your lessons for crime and deviance for year 13. You should have some sort of knowledge about the topic before we start in September. I know we've done a lesson on the introduction of crime and deviance, and you were all quite excited, I'd say. Um, so here goes. So, Durkheim's positive functions of crime theory. So your objective is to be able to describe Durkheim's positive functions of theory, functions of crime theory. Most students will be able to use examples, and again, I think most of you will be able to evaluate Durkheim's theory of crime. As year 13s, you should be able to AO3 Durkheim anyway. So you'll do it now. Make a list of everything you can remember about functionalism. Now, this is really important because functionalists will view crime not negatively as a conflict theorists, because they are a consensus theory. Okay. So, functionalist theories of crime. We've got Durkheim's positive functions theory, Merton's strain theory, and Cohen's subcultural strain theory. All three theories are their own separate theories and could be asked about on their own, okay? They are, however, all interrelated and build upon each other, and it is also quite important to get a functionalist theories of crime essay question just generally on all three theories. So I will be setting you these essays anyway next term. A brief overview of functionalism and crime. So, functionalists see society as based on value consensus, shared norms and values, and this is why society operates so smoothly. Sharing these norms and values creates a sensation of social solidarity, binding individuals together and telling them how to conduct themselves. Functionalists argue that in order to achieve this social solidarity, society has two mechanisms. We've got socialization, and Parsons talks about this in terms of the family, for example. We see it again in education. It teaches the shared norms and values to its members, telling individuals how to act and what is right and wrong. Social control is when institutions in society have the power to reward or punish behaviour, ensuring individuals behave in the ways society expects. Okay, so then that's solidifies your socialization, your primary socialization, especially. Okay, so an institution could be education, and that will be your secondary socialization. And if you were in your primary socialization, the institution would be your family. Okay, so crime is inevitable. Inevitable. Crime is a normal and integral part of all healthy societies. Now, why would Durkheim say such a thing? Because he views society as being in consensus with each other. So why then does a functionalist agree that we do need crime? Okay, pause this video for me and think about it, or write down what you think. So Durkheim argues that it is inevitable because of two reasons. A, not everyone is effectively socialized into society's norms and values. Individuals are exposed to different influences and circumstances, so it cannot be expected that everyone accepts society's norms, values, and expectations. It is also inevitable because within society there is a diversity of lifestyles and values. So different subcultures in society have their own norms and values, and what is considered as deviance differs between these subcultures. So when we look at anomie, an anomie is a feeling of normallessness. Okay, so crime and deviance are likely to occur when people are unsure about or are less committed to shared values and rules, for example. Okay, but in terms of an exam tip, I want you guys to constantly remember is you need to be prepared to link basic functionalist concepts and arguments to their explanation of crime and deviance. This is why at the start, as you do it now, I asked you, what does a functionalist think? Okay, or what does a functionalist theory think? So as a structural consensus theory, functionalism argues against crime, argues that crime occurs when social solidarity is threatened by a lack of effective social control mechanisms, and when institutions such as a family are failing to socialize people into a shared culture. This is why socialization is very important. okay, because they go hand in hand. So, according to Durkheim, society is moving towards anomie, so it's normallessness. The rules governing behavior that are becoming weaker and less clear cut. Individuals are becoming increasingly diverse and different from one another, and this weakened shared culture is leading to higher levels of deviance. Now, it's important because for Durkheim, he believed that crime was inevitable and would be an increasing problem in modern society as rapid social change and diversity could potentially result in anomie. But he did feel that a certain level of crime was a normal part of healthy society and would lead to various positive functions such as allowing positive social change to occur and acting as a safety valve to prevent more serious crime. Okay, so the criminal justice system and punishment also have the function of reminding people of the boundaries of acceptable behavior and promoting social solidarity through reaffirming shared values. Okay, so we've got boundary maintenance and adaptation to adaptation and change. So when we were talking about social change, Durkheim states that change starts with an act of deviance. There must be some scope for people to be able to change society's norms and values, not too much though. Okay, so by people committing these deviant acts, it allows society to change and progress. For example, same-sex relationships used to be classed as deviant, but now norms and values have changed and progress has been made in society, so allowing of the same-sex marriage. Okay, your boundary maintenance is actually quite interesting because crimes produces a reaction from society, so uniting its members. So when we look at 9/11, for example, well, crime reinforced societies to reaffirm their belief system. Okay, so Durkheim explains the function of punishment. It is not necessary for the wrongdoer to suffer, but to reaffirm society's shared values on what is right and wrong. So, two further positive functions. Davis in 1937 stated that deviance can act as a safety valve, releasing stress in society. For example, prostitution allows men to release their sexual frustrations without threatening the monogamous nuclear family. Okay, so we wanted less, I guess, mistresses, and then the man leaving his wife for the mistress, and more so on prostitution, which doesn't involve a lot of, let's say, emotions, okay, from the man to want to leave his family. Cohen claimed that crime and deviance acts as a warning device for society that something is not working correctly and change needs to happen. For example, high levels of truancy indicate problems in the education system, especially if it's from a particular group of people who are bunking, for example. So, does society actually promote crime? Now, Durkheim argues that too little crime in society is a warning signal, okay? So too little means society is repressing and controlling its members too much, stifling individual freedom and preventing change. Which countries can you name for me which seems to have too little crime? In 66 argued that since deviant performs positive functions, society purposefully promotes it in order to keep a healthy balance of crime. He suggests agents of social control, such as the police, actually aim to maintain a certain level of crime rather than to rid it completely. Society will sometimes try to maintain it through protests, demonstrations, festivals, and Freshers' Week, for example. Okay, because getting drunk and acting disorderly in public is actually a crime. It's very deviant. You shouldn't be doing it, guys. So, examples of positive functions. In your folders or your books, you have been given 4 scenarios, examples of crime. Sorry, it will be on Google Classroom. So, read them through and decide what positive function they are producing according to Functionalist. So, this example I gave you about prostitution, for example, from Davis, is a wild example, but I want you to be able to think outside of the box, okay? Pause this video, get that done for me, please. The terror attack was absolutely horrible. The only issue is functionalists would argue that despite its consequences, it did bring a positive effect too. So after the attack, the whole country came together. We united, we condemned terrorism and any kind of behavior as such. We had shared rituals. All religions in the country and the world got together to condemn this act, for example. We enforced a sense of social solidarity as a one nation, one world, believe in the same thing. Now, this is a very good example of boundary maintenance. You look at a bad behavior or something criminal, and you don't want to be a part of that, especially when you see the consequences. 9/11 is another example of a horrific attack that brought the whole world together, not just in the US, but actually the whole world. To this day, services and vigils are held for victims of the 9/11 terror attack. Again, really, really, really good example of boundary maintenance. Now, when we want to evaluate Durkheim, okay, considering we haven't actually had a look at subcultural theories of Cohen and Cloward and Olin, and also Merton's notion of strain theory, you still have enough at this precise moment to be able to evaluate Durkheim's theory of crime. So functionalism is useful because it allows us to see how crime is essential for society to function. Durkheim states that society requires a certain amount of crime and deviance for society to function, but does not state how much. Functionalists discuss crime in terms of their positive functions, for example, strengthening solidarity, but people do not commit crime in order to do this. So why do they do what they do? Functionalism looks at crime and its functions for society as a whole, but does not look individually at crime and its effects on individuals. Crime does not always lead to solidarity and can sometimes have the opposite effect. So, for example, people staying inside the house because they are too scared to go outside, especially after the terror attacks. A lot of Asian men have been negatively stereotyped, for example, as if 9/11 and even the Manchester attacks was an Asian thing and not a terrorist act, for example. And so a lot of people have taken out their aggression on young Asian men, for example. Okay. Now, we will be looking at utilitarian crime as well, and that's essential because crime committed for financial gain isn't really attached to Durkheim's theory as of yet. We will be looking at Merton, and that will make more sense to you, and especially when we look at traditional Marxist views. Utilitarian crimes are really important. So when we start looking at when we start looking at white collar crime, well, actually, that makes perfect sense, but green collar crime, it doesn't really. In terms of your exam questions, these are the kind of questions you'll be asked. So outline and explain 2 reasons why functionalists argue crime is inevitable in society. Outline and explain 2 positive functions of crime and deviance for society. Can you please do that for me? Remember, it's a minute and a half per mark. Okay. Pause this video for me, please. Mark scheme. So you've got 2 reasons, okay, for outline and explain 2 reasons why functionalists argue crime is inevitable. Well, 2 reasons. You have to state that clearly. They will get you 2 marks. So not everyone is socialized into norms and values effectively, and the range of diversity in society. They are 2 reasons. You will get a further mark for explaining it appropriately. We've already been through that. Okay, so this is almost like your self-assessment you can do. Your question number 2, outline and explain 2 positive functions of crime and deviance for society. Well, boundary maintenance and adaptation and change, safety valve or warning device, then a further mark for explaining it appropriately. Okay, so your 4 markers aren't actually really too difficult for you to do, so long as you simply do what the question is asking you to do. It's asking you to outline and then explain. And an outline and explain are your AO1s and AO2s. So, in terms of your plenary, I want you to answer these questions. Name 2 other positive functions named by other functionalists. What two positive functions does Durkheim name? Give me one reason why Durkheim argues crime is inevitable in society. Give me two criticisms of Durkheim's positive functions of crime theory. Try to do this as quickly as possible, because in lesson I would have given you a whiteboard for you to do these one by one. Okay, so try and do it really as quickly as possible and see what your answer is. Okay, so that was a quick introduction into your functionalist theory of crime and deviance. We still have Merton to look at, and that will be a whole lesson by itself, because he is quite detailed in why he thinks the strain theory to anomie and Merton's goals and means scheme is important in understanding why we commit crime and how we commit crime.